Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wellness and Legacy Group, where we are passionate of connecting death care professionals. Today, we're in for a big treat. We are going to be speaking with Rachel Weinstein regarding grief counseling, which a lot of people, I think, have not experienced. And we're going to uncover a lot of things. As you know, we're death care professionals, and grief is a big part of what we do. And so I'm excited to have Rachel here. For those of you that this is maybe your first time watching this video and you may say, what are you talking about, Carolyn? Death care industry, death care professionals. Well, this is basically what we've put together as a group on what would be the entire process from beginning to end. When we first started our group, we started, as you guys know, I'm a probate specialist that works with families that inherit property either through probate or trust. So my journey in this space started right here after somebody had already passed away. But what we realized is everybody that deals in this section of the business naturally becomes an advocate for pre-planning. Do it the right way, get your things in order. So we started doing pre-planning, and then we realized, well, you get all your plans in order and now you actually start aging. And now you get to that point where you are going to be using your planning services. And then, as we know, we all pass away. It's going to happen to all of us. We cross over, and then how do we effectively deal with the post administration side of the death care space? So this is the death care industry, and these are our group's mission is to understand it, to learn it, and so that we can become better professionals and better serve our communities and our customers. Our vision is creating a seamless connection between the wellness industry, which serves individuals prior to death, and the legacy industry, which supports individuals and families post death. What we've recognized is that both of these sectors often serve the same customer at the same time, sometimes simultaneously, and our group aims to foster a deeper understanding and collaboration across all these critical stages of service and ultimately unite our industry together. So today you are actually standing in our mastermind of industry professionals. And so we said, how possibly will our networking group really truly understand all the aspects of all the professionals that are in our industry in a 1 hour lunch where we meet locally in Ponte Vedra, right? So we've set aside Tuesdays at 12 o'clock to sit down with these professionals and just have a real deep dive on their specific trades and what they do. So welcome. We're happy you're here. And I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen here and welcome Rachel to our virtual stage. There she is.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Rachel. And we're excited to, we're in the post administration side of the death care mastermind. And what you do in grief counseling is, it literally goes hand in hand with everything that is happening in this side. Sometimes we just think about the business side of post administration, but as we're going to deep dive today, processing the grief, going through it, how it helps the families, and how it also helps the professionals. And I know you're going to share. So, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, letting our audience know a little bit about you and a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely. So, my name is Rachel Weinstein. I am a grief specialist and a certified grief educator. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm the founder of Jacksonville Center for Grief and Loss, which is my private practice. Um, I provide support, education, and consultation for grief, loss, and life transition. And that includes losses that are not just related to death and dying, and it is not always related just to a death that has occurred. It it encompasses many aspects along the continuum, including before a death has occurred. It may not even be a physical death. So I'll talk a little bit about the types of losses in a bit, but just so that you know, I can come in on in different areas of the continuum. Um, so I have, I'm sorry.
Oh, all right, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Um, I have a bachelor's degree in applied health science and a master's degree in education counseling with a specialty in counseling and counselor education. Both are from Indiana University. Like I said, I live and I work in Jacksonville, but I see clients both in person in Jacksonville and with the help of Zoom. I support people from all over the country, throughout the state of Florida, other places of the country, and even some other countries as well.
Wow. Yeah, I love that with Zoom. I mean, you can,
Yeah.
especially with counseling, that's incredible. You
Yes.
can help people
Absolutely.
everywhere. Wonderful. Well, let's dive right in.
Okay.
Let's go over. A lot of people hear the word grief.
Hmm.
I instantly think of the loss of a loved one, but what does grief actually mean?
So that's a good question. Grief is a natural and normal process that we go through. It's a process, not an event. When there's been a loss or a change in anything or anyone that's been important to us. When we talk about bereavement, that's related to a physical death, and that's the process we go through after someone has died. But grief encompasses a lot more than death and dying. So if someone has cared about the whatever, whether it's a job or their health or someone else's health, and there's been a big change, they will grieve. If there's been a death, they will grieve. If they have a diagnosis themselves or a loved one or a change in their mobility, or they have moved into a new home, there's even such thing as, grief related to good changes, having a baby, buying a new home,
Mm,
having a new marriage. There are still losses that people experience, and they kind of wonder, wow, why am I feeling so off? It's all grief.
wow.
So it's a lot more than bereavement, and it's more than death and dying. But of course, it's related to death and dying too. The bottom
Right.
line is it's a natural and normal process.
Right. So can you take us through, is grief and bereavement, is there a distinction between the two as far as how someone processes? We talked about a little bit before we got on the call about the stages of grief. Are they the same stages of what someone experienced after bereavement or
So, the
separation?
stages of grief that most people refer to when they talk about stages were first developed by a thought leader in death and dying named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was sort of the um, the godmother, so to speak, of all things related to death and dying and grief. But what people don't understand is that she identified those stages as a result of a study that she did in terms of what people who have been given news of their own terminal illness typically go through. And those stages that she identified were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But they were strictly related to what the person typically goes through when they're given news of their own terminal illness. It was not meant to speak to grief of all kinds, and it was definitely not meant to be finite and orderly, like first you go through this, then you must go through that, then this, then that, and then you're done. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about stages, and it depends on who you read, who the sort of philosopher is as to how many stages there are. I subscribe to something called a dual process model, which just means there are just two different dimensions that we go in between, like a pendulum swinging between one and the other. And they're either loss-oriented types of activities, active mourning and longing, and that type of like leaning into the sadness related to it, and then life oriented activities like um, investing in life again and maybe looking forward to the future or planning for a future. And when you think about it, we're always in one place or another. We're always in one of those two places, including during the experience that we have when we're grieving a loved one and we're very fresh in our grief. We still might have moments of lightness. We might have moments of laughter. We might have moments where we think, oh gosh, I seem to be focusing on this for the first time. and instead of, unable to get out of bed. So there's a lot of back and forth between loss oriented and life oriented activities that we go through, both actively during a loss and just along life's continuum. So that's the one that I subscribe to. But
Right.
in short, those stages, widely misunderstood, they are pretty commonly what people often visit. Those, denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance. However, um, they're not orderly. You can skip them, you can revisit them, and people often do.
Mhm.
So no judging someone else or yourself if you take a
How
look at those
you
stages.
how you go through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I see from my professional perspective and dealing with people that are, their loved one has passed away, and
Hmm.
now they're, get selling their property or working on their house.
Yeah.
Something I hear very commonly they say, is they're almost like, I've heard several men say this, I should have been over here, fixing up my mom's house, and now I just want to, do what's right by her, and
Yeah.
and I think I hear them say that, and I've heard it more, several times from men, specifically men, and I think that there's a part of like guilt, right? That
It's huge. It's huge. And it comes both from men and women. Um, in every type of grief you can imagine, every kind of loss, there is typically always this period of, if only I would have done this, or I could have done that, I should have done this. And the truth about that is it's a really natural part of the grief process. So as a grief counselor, I don't rush in and try to, intellectualize and reason them away from that. I acknowledge that place that they are is part of the grief process.
Mhm.
um, the other part of it that I let them know is that we feel really helpless and vulnerable when we've experienced a loss. It's really unsettling, and it can leave us feeling really ungrounded and kind of helpless. And most of us would much rather feel responsible or guilty than we would feel helpless. So a
Mm,
lot of people unconsciously grab onto what they could have done and that they're responsible, versus saying, gosh, you know what? I didn't see this coming. I didn't anticipate what I'm going through. I I'm helpless.
mhm.
Wow, if that's true, how unsettling of a thought is that? That life can be so incredibly fragile.
Or abrupt,
Yep,
right? It's
exactly. So most people unconsciously kind of hold on to get a grip on, the the responsibility they feel like they had, that they did something wrong, rather than saying, wow, I really was helpless in this process, I couldn't have prevented this, and that's scary.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Most people wouldn't, naturally go to that, helpless. They'd more like condemn
Right.
themselves, if you will, or say think everything that they should have done,
Yeah.
right or wrong. I've
That
heard.
might be why you hear it from men more often, because you know they often put themselves in kind of the fix it mode. I've got to make this right, I've got to do something to fix this.
Right. I remember this one guy, he was like, my mom, gave me this key to come in her house, and I never used it. I never used the key, and it's so I see that with the house, because the house I feel like is like it's almost like the last piece, in a sense of
Mhm.
the physical of the person.
Yes. And
And
for that reason, people can have a lot of difficulty letting material things go, because they put a lot of meaning into those things, and they're filled with memories, and they feel very guilty and responsible for letting anything that has a meaning attached to it go. So
right.
there can be a lot of, sure, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but a lot of quarreling between siblings, and a lot of people wanting, ownership of this or control over that. And this is a big part of what I can unload for people in your position, or anyone listening who has the experience of someone who's kind of having their grief show up that way, where they're really attached to stuff. There's a lot of quarreling, and Um, I deal with that quite a lot and help people move through that through a lot of different means, where they can feel more complete and
Mm,
identify. I help them identify what they can do that they consider to be honoring their loved one,
mm,
maybe through a ritual, maybe um, through conversations, maybe writing a letter, maybe, so many different things.
mm.
So yeah.
Yeah. So do you based on, we work on both sides like we had just discussed, where, you've got, people that are pre-planning and then you've got the person that's actually aging, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes families will kind of know that this is coming up, that, maybe their loved one is getting ill, or they have a heads up that
Mhm.
obviously it seems silly because we're all gonna die, right? We're all gonna like we
Mhm.
all have a date, a final day. But it's I feel like when they kind of already know that someone's sick, they can kind of process it better than when you've got those just sudden tragedies that just catch everybody off guard.
Mhm.
Um, and from my perspective, it's like the family side, the administration side of dealing with everything,
Yeah.
those people are the ones that get thrust into responsibility.
Yeah.
So does their grief, like, is it almost like they put it on pause, or they can't, properly grieve because they have to do so many of these administrative tasks and handle things?
So yeah, when there's a sudden loss like that, and someone has to get all of the administrative things done, it's really a double whammy. And I'll talk a little bit about all of the effects of grief, and one of them being our cognitive processes, our ability to focus and concentrate and remember things declines when we're in grief. And then we've got all these administrative tasks to do. So it's really tough. I always encourage people in grief, especially after a sudden loss, to delegate whatever they can in terms of the administrative things. Some things can't be delegated, but a lot can. Um, so yes, to answer your question, they often do kind of put the process has to be kind of on hold. However, I will say that the more sudden a loss, the more delayed the reaction is, the grief response,
Mm,
because we're in such shock, our body cannot begin to process the enormity of it, and so it just walls us off from it. It's almost like, when there's a physical injury and we experience shock and we don't feel pain, we might have a bullet and keep running, right?
mhm,
um excuse me. It's the same when there's a sudden loss. The person often feels like they're in a total fog and they're just going through motions robotically. They might even have kind of a flat presentation where they just seem glassy-eyed, and they're not going to retain a whole lot of what you're saying, by the way. So there are lots of things that I'll talk about that you can do as a professional when you're dealing with someone after a sudden loss. But I will
mm,
say that all of those things also happen when you have had time, or anticipation of a loss. It doesn't only happen during sudden loss. Um,
they talk about
yeah,
like caregivers, after a
yeah,
caregiver is like taking care, taking care, taking care, and then that person passes away, or,
yeah.
then the caregiver can just completely crash.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in addition to that, this is one of the reasons caregivers will often lose their health so rapidly while they're caregiving, because the stress of it. Grief is stress anyway. Caregiving is grief, and grief is stress. So caregivers are stressed. And what happens to us physically when we're in stress? All the stress hormones lower our immunity. We're more open to opportunistic infections and illness. So often you see one person, like let's say one spouse dies and then the other one dies shortly thereafter, and sometimes people say, oh, they died of a broken heart. Well, I'm not dismissing that option, but the science behind it really is that they're so their stress hormones are so high that they are much more open to illness and infection, and so
Mm,
they often get Excuse me, I'm just getting over something. Mm. They often get sick and often die right after a loved one does because they're just overcome with um, illness related to their stress.
Yeah.
So let me just share a little bit about all the different kinds of losses that anyone listening can be on the lookout for that also produce grief in
Hmm.
addition to someone's physical death. So relationship losses, divorces and breakups and estrangements from family, loss of a pet, um, loss of a role as a caregiver. We were just talking about caregivers. So not only has a caregiver who's just lost a loved one, um, are they grieving that human being, but they've also lost a role. It also may be that a parent has lost a child, or an adult who's been caring for a parent has been so used to actively being of service, and all of a sudden they're not, and they can feel like this secondary loss.
Hmm.
Transitional losses like loss of a home, foreclosure, moving, relocation to a new city, or to a senior community, just a loss of a familiar community, or a sense of belonging. So it might be in their same area in Jacksonville or Nocatee, but they have a whole neighborhood and a community and neighbors and the neighborhood store that they went to, and all of that's changed. Retirement or graduation, big loss of structure, and often income related losses too when it comes to retirement. Occupational losses, financial losses, like loss of a job or a career. Their identity might have been wrapped up in that career. Bankruptcy or significant financial setback, workplace injuries, disabilities, maybe a loss of a business or a professional reputation. Of course, we've got physical losses like, loss of physical ability or mobility, diagnosis of a chronic illness or a terminal condition, infertility, um, loss of some kind of sensory ability like vision or hearing, aging and loss of youth or strength or appearance. Of course, emotional losses like, um, oh gosh, maybe after a trauma or a crime, someone has a loss of their sense of security or safety.
Hmm.
Um, you've got losses related to parenting and fertility, like miscarriages and stillbirths and adoption related grief. Um,
There's a
a
lot
lot
of
of it.
there's a lot of loss in life in
There sure
general.
is. So that's why I want people to kind of expand their idea of what grief is attached to.
That's very good. Yeah, because I think when do people really reach out for help? I mean, when do they think, when should I contact someone like yourself, or do people naturally think that, or is it usually like someone guiding them in that direction?
Sometimes it's someone guiding them. Sometimes um, people just realize that. I'll tell you one of the least likely times that I receive somebody's call is very shortly after a loss, because that's usually the time that people are surrounded by people who remember that they're grieving. Now, it goes away faster than you might imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, at a funeral or after a funeral, excuse me, they're surrounded by people who know about their loss, who are acknowledging it. And someone might say, oh, they're doing so well. Well, first of all, they're in shock. Secondly, they have a lot of things to do. And third, the people around them know about their loss and are acknowledging it. Well, all those things can go away very quickly,
Hmm.
especially the people, including people close to you that you would think would be there for you the fastest. We are not prepared as a culture to manage our own grief or other people. So a lot of people back away because they're afraid they're going to make it worse. They're going to say the wrong thing. They're going to say something stupid. They're going to open a
Mm-hmm.
can of worms that they don't know how to handle. So
Hmm.
it can be a really isolating time. And often when people have that experience of other people going away and that they're just expected to get back to life, back to work, back to quote unquote normal, and they can't, that's often when they reach out to me.
What do you have, like, some tips you could give us of what is the appropriate response of a friend or a family member or someone in our life? Or, maybe we could do that part first and then talk about it professionally. But
Absolutely. So
what should we do?
hmm It's a great question. So first, unburden yourself with the idea that you have to find something brilliant to say that's going to help them feel better. So unless you can do magic tricks, you can't take their grief away. And there's no brilliant words that you can say that's going to make it better for them. What really helps is your presence, not backing away from them, but actually doing the opposite, giving the person an opportunity to talk about what's going on for them, how they're doing, how they're really doing. So just simply say, you can always start with, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Not I'm sorry for your loss because it's a little overly shared and a little cliche, but I'm so sorry that you're going through this. And then the second thing you can do is ask a question. Ask something that's open-ended, something that they can't answer yes or no to, like that starts with what, how, when. So for example, um, what can you tell me? Maybe you've just lost your mom. And I could say, Carolyn, I'm so sorry that you've lost your mom. Tell me about your mom. What was she like? Or what's the hardest part for you just right now today?
Yeah, I like that
Gives
one.
them an opening just to say what that is. And then whatever that is, listen to it. Just be there, listen. And you can even say, if you really don't know what to say, you can say, gosh, you know what? I have no words, but please know that I care and I'm here.
See, that's my line.
Right? You don't have to
You
have brilliant
you
words.
would think me that I have a lot of words, but
They don't need a lot of words. They need your presence. And
yeah,
they need you not to back away from them. And a real gift is to give them an opportunity to talk about how they're doing, really how they're doing, or to
mm,
talk about what they've lost. Wow, what's that like for you? Get curious. If they don't
mm,
want to talk about it, they won't.
mm,
99% of people they'll go, "Wow, thank you for asking." You
mm,
know?
mhm. Yeah, I think for me, just speaking personally, as weird as this sounds with my personality, it sounds weird even saying it out loud, but I actually like shy away, like I don't know what it is about somebody passing away, or if I'm very close to that person, it's different. But like if it's somebody that I know, like just kind of at a distance, I want to show my respect. I want to, I don't want to be like, I'm not going to say anything, but I also don't know where to go past that point. Besides, I'm sorry to hear about your loss. I'll keep you in my prayers. I just feel almost inept. Like, what do you do
You're
after?
not alone. Most people feel exactly like you do, and out of you know, worry about like not wanting to overstep or not wanting to say the wrong thing or intrude, they back away.
Mm-hmm.
So, the one thing that I encourage people not to do is to say, let me know if there's anything you need, because that puts the burden on them. And frankly, they're not going to know, like, what can you bring them back? I mean,
Yeah.
right. So
No.
you can simply say, you can give some limited options like, you know what? Would it be helpful for me to have to do some errands for you that are just too overwhelming right now, or to watch your kids while you take a nap, or depending, of course, what your relationship is like with the person. Just
Mm-hmm.
bring them a meal or a cup of coffee, or right, just
Yeah.
actually do
Like
something.
just
Even if they don't
listening.
drink coffee, they're going to go, "Gosh, you know what? She showed up at my doorstep and brought this to me. That was lovely." They'll remember that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing you say is really just give them the opportunity to talk to you,
Yes,
not so much what
absolutely.
you were saying to them. Just, how are you feeling? How are you taking this
Yeah.
loss? Like, how is this affecting you?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I always like to ask, what's hardest for you right now? Just
what's
right now
hardest? Yeah,
today,
I wrote
because
that.
that will give you an opportunity to learn something that might give you an idea of how you could show up for them. Like, gosh, you know what? I can't get any sleep. And I've got, you know, I'm so tired all the time, but I've got kids, or I've got, still got to cook for my husband, or whatever it is. You can say, gosh,
Mhm.
you know what? Let me set up some meal deliveries for you, or let me watch your kids while you take a nap, whatever it is. I'm using that example twice. Um, but honestly, if you ask someone what's hardest, it may not be something that you can come in and find a solution for, but it might be helpful for them just to say it, just to talk about it.
Right. So this is a follow-up to that. So let's say that you did engage in that conversation with the person. What how often should you check in on people that you may know are in some type of loss? I mean, for this purpose of this call, let's consider it a death of a loved one. What, is it just that one reach out when you find out that this person passed away and you show your respect? Or should you try multiple attempts to kind of break
You
through.
know, of course, it depends on your relationship. Um, what I often do with in my own life when I know someone who's experienced a loss is that I'll let them know that I'm thinking of them regularly. It might be daily, it might be weekly, and I might call them. I do encourage this. Instead of texting, instead of doing it on social media, actually pick up the phone or see them in person. It's rare these days, but it's really appreciated. Um, and what I'll say to like a friend or someone I care about who's lost someone is, listen, you don't have to pick up the phone. I'm just going to leave you a message to let you know I'm thinking about you. And if you
Mhm.
want to pick up the phone or if you want to call me, great, but you don't have to. It's never unappreciated to do that.
Yeah. So
Of
really.
course, it depends on. Here's the other thing. You can write something to them and include a memory of the person they've lost.
Mhm,
Something that brings that person to life. Gosh, I remember when your mom baked those brownies. They were so amazing. Or she told this joke and she made us laugh and whatever it was.
mhm,
That kind of memory sharing is really meaningful.
mhm. Okay. So
Same
I
thing with talking about them.
right, right. Bring
Now, of
bring
course,
them.
if we're talking about a professional and this is your client or whatever, it's very different. But honestly, anything you can do that is genuine from the heart and that's not cliche, that says, listen, I have no words. I can only imagine the kind of grief that you're in. Please know that I care and that I'm here.
Mhm. And make yourself available to have a conversation or just let them say what they want to say. Because I think so often we want to like help people, but then we don't know how to help them. And you don't want to just impose yourself on top of people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I have a friend that's coming to my mind right now. Her husband is going through cancer. And so for her, it's I feel supportive to her as a woman, as a mom, like she's going
Hmm.
through that her side. Of course, her husband is the one that's actually fighting off the disease and going through all that, but she's the caretaker, right? And sometimes the caretakers can even be just as grief stricken as
Absolutely.
people. So you've given me some encouragement of just how I can just present myself and say let's grab a coffee, or just
Hmm.
to maybe just give them that time to talk.
Absolutely.
Mm,
That's the gift, is in giving them there's this saying that every wound needs a witness. So to have
mm,
a human being with you and to be able to share what you're going through, how you really feel, what you're worried about, what you're sad over, what you're anxious about, what the hardest thing for you is, if you're feeling guilty, whatever that is, just being able to have another human being to share that with is what helps. It's not what comes back at them. It's not advice or somebody fixing it or saying something brilliant. It's being
mhm.
able to share it and have somebody really receive it and stay put, not back away.
Yeah. So I want to jump into the professional side.
Uh-huh.
For all of us are, working in this space, right?
Right.
We're
Right.
doing the business side of the post administration of what
Yeah.
happens after someone passes away.
Right.
Um, I'll tell you how I deal with it, okay? And you can tell
Hmm.
me if this is right or wrong. I basically don't touch it.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I don't unless somebody shares with me, right? If they want to share with me, then I will do kind of like what you said. I'll hear them out, I'll let them talk, and but I don't really as a professional, I know there's been a
I
loss.
get it. I
I
get it.
know for a
Absolutely.
fact there's been a loss.
Yep.
Obviously, that's what we're doing. I'm helping them, work with the family's belongings that have passed away and all the things. But I don't really approach it in a terms of like, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling with the loss? I
Of
don't know if
course.
other professionals, maybe
Yep.
probate attorneys, trust administration, funeral homes, like you think about
Yeah.
everything that a person has to go through.
Sure.
Are any professionals reaching out? Are any of us, offering that, you know, care that maybe they need? Or
So are you asking me if
what do you
I'm aware of any of the professionals offering something like
well,
um
I don't know. Like I only know what I
okay.
know, right?
Well, here's
And
the answer to your question in terms of like, is that wrong? No, the
uh,
aim is not for you to become a grief counselor. I
right.
have a job for a reason. You guys have a job
Yeah,
for a reason. Um,
probably.
excuse me. What I do want to say is that I want to talk about some of the ways that grief will show up in your office,
Okay.
even without you realizing it, so that I can give you some things to mitigate, to soften that experience without being their grief counselor. All right. So this is what I mean. I've made an acronym for the ways that grief shows up in ways other than just sadness. All right. The acronym is PIES, like chocolate pies, PIES, and then there are two S's, right? Each letter stands for something else. Grief shows up. The P is for physically. Grief shows up physically. So people in grief often have headaches. They often have dry mouth. So you can have water available for them, right? Um, they often have kind of racing heart, like chest palpitations, lumps in their throat. Um, they often have digestive issues. They might need to run to the bathroom a lot. They might feel nauseated, um, not be able to eat, walk more slowly. Their feet just feel like heavy and like they're just slow. So that's going to show up in your office during your appointments, right? So some of the things that you can address, have water available for them, right? People in
Mhm.
grief also might be cold, believe it or not, more often because when you feel vulnerable, and it's also part of anxiety, it often shows up as cold. You're physically cold. So
Mm.
even, though I'm not talking about being outside and being cold, but inside, you may want to have something kind of cozy available for them to like a throw on your couch or whatever, if you have a room where you're sitting and talking with them, water available for them, tissues available for them. um, so that's just some of the ways that grief is going to show up physically. The I in the PIES acronym is for the intellectual part, and this is really where it can make a difference to you as professionals. Intellectually, people will have cognitive slowdown. They'll have a dive in their ability to focus, to concentrate, to remember. So it's super important that you keep things as simple as possible in terms of explaining. Don't overload them with information. Give them something that they can read that's not overwhelming to take away with them so they can refer to it. And reminders, remind them that they have an appointment with you tomorrow, whatever it is that you might normally just expect a grown-up to handle and put it on their calendar and just show up. You may have to do a little more hand holding with things when it comes to cognitive abilities because it's going to be slower and it's going to be compromised as they grieve.
Mhm.
um Emotionally, yes, people might be sad, they might be openly, weepy, but they also might be super anxious, like worried and um, feeling uh, maybe asking you a ton of questions or calling you a lot, maybe the same question many times. They might have not only forgotten that they asked you before, but they might have a high degree of anxiety and worry. It's part of grief too. Um, they might seem really spacey, disorganized, irritable, angry. These are all signs for you that if you know that they've had a loss or a change just by the nature, either what they've mentioned or the business that you're in. um, these are some things to keep in mind, that if they are getting support from someone like a grief counselor, they will be better able to do business with you because they'll be able to have a place to get some coping strategies for those all the physical things that are happening to them, their insomnia, their headaches, their dry mouth, their digestive issues, um, the cognitive stuff that's happening, the emotional stuff that's happening. That the two S's stands for the social impact, like their friends going away and kind of falling off the face of the earth while they're in grief, and the spiritual things that happen to us, not religious necessarily, but people start asking big questions. Why?
Mhm.
Why them? Why me? Why now? What could I have done? What's the meaning of life? All those things. These are
Mhm.
things that I help them sort through and take on. You definitely don't have to, but knowing that someone's compromised in these ways and being able to identify that because this person is going through loss or change and they're emotional or they're irritable, they're spacey, they're disorganized, they're tired, they're anxious, this is an opportunity to have them get in front of someone to get some support and some coping strategies so that they are better able to do their work with you.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I've never really, red flagged those type of behaviors.
Hmm.
I've always chalked it up as, gosh, this person, I always gotta, I've never tied the two, but I think knowing this information, I can be more aware, right? Of
Hmm.
if somebody, because typically people won't necessarily say that they're experiencing a rough time, right? They're just pushing through.
Right.
They may not even know it themselves, right?
Right. But if you've identified that something big has changed in their life, something's been lost, something's changed, something that they've been invested in is really different now, that's grief, plain and
Right,
simple.
right.
Yep. And so you don't have to become their grief counselor. Just being able to identify that and just
Mhm.
say, hey, you know what? The changes or the losses you're dealing with can be really difficult. You deserve support.
Mhm.
I know someone who specializes in getting through loss and change. Can I connect you to her? Something
Mm.
simple like that. So just, hey, normalize it. These kinds of changes, these losses that you're experiencing, whatever that is, they can be really difficult. And you deserve support. And then you introduce me. I know someone who specializes in getting through loss and change. You don't have to say a grief counselor because sometimes people go, grief? What?
Right,
Loss and change are the key words.
right, right. And what do you think stands out specifically with bereavement? You know, over the
So if someone has, that someone has experienced a death
Mhm.
of a loved one, it may not even be related to the business that you're doing with them, but they are experiencing a loss of a loved one,
Right.
maybe a family member, maybe a friend.
Does anything different show up in that
Oh,
like
is that what you meant?
yeah,
Um, Oof, no. The short answer is no.
yeah.
Um, it really is shades of the same kind of thing, which is why I want people to know that while the word bereavement is directly attached to the process that we go through when someone dies, grief, that same process happens when may not be a death, but something has been lost or has changed significantly that we've been really invested in. So yeah, all those things, same things show up.
Similar process.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about a customer. We were in the garage, and her dad had this car underneath a car cover, and the house was sold, and now we had to deal with this car. And as soon as we pulled up the cover off the car, she just lost it. She just started
Oh,
crying like
oh gosh.
hysterically the whole time. She never really cried, really. And then I
Wow.
was like, at in the moment, I was just like, oh, it's okay. I gave her a hug. I was like, don't worry, because I feel like sometimes when people cry in front of me, they're
Can be
embarrassed.
hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're embarrassed, or they, and I would have to assume that estate planning attorneys, probate attorneys, funeral homes, like the professionals, because remember, like we talked about it last week with John Miller, in trust administration. So
Hmm.
pretty much somebody passes away, the first thing they have to do is they're typically going right to planning the funeral, getting a death certificate. I mean, they're thrust into it. I mean, there's no like, this person passed, give me some time to process this. No, it's
Yep.
passed away and you're thrust immediately into either planning a funeral, or maybe your loved one already had all of that taken care of.
Mm.
And then as soon as that's completed, and sometimes not in the order, sometimes they're calling the realtor first, sometimes they're
Right.
calling the attorney first,
Yep.
what should we do?
Exactly.
Sometimes they're
Exactly.
calling the life insurance company first, right? But there's this professional, that they have to deal with right at the beginning. So
Yeah.
I would have to say, and I haven't asked this question to other professionals, I got to add it to my list, but I deal with a lot of, I mean, not a lot, but definitely, I'm sure more people cry with me than a regular realtor. Okay. Because it is selling their loved one's property. They are dealing with that immediate death,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
So it's interesting, like how we respond, and like I said, I just give them a hug, I let them know it's okay, don't
Yeah.
worry,
Yeah, nobody needs to become a grief counselor, but
I-
to be human and to not back away from them and to just and look, it can be hard. If somebody cries or you're confronted with a big loss and you're not really comfortable with I don't know too many people are unless they do it for a living, um, with just being still and receiving somebody's emotion or painful story, just to be able to say, "Hey, that is really difficult." Just normalize it for them and then
Mhm,
say, you know, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be dealing with a whole lot right now. This is big. And
mhm,
you deserve some support. Instead of letting them think that, oh wow, you're messed up. Here's a counselor's number. Like I don't want you to give them that that idea, but just say you deserve support. And I know someone who specializes in getting through loss and change. And may I
mhm,
connect you to her? And then
mhm,
you can either share my information, you can, call me. Um, Usually, if it's an adult and they have my contact information already, I take my cue that they're ready for support when they contact me. So, in
mhm,
other words, if you called me and say, "Hey, I have this client, she's experienced a loss. I haven't mentioned you yet, but could you call her? I know she needs it." I would be reluctant to do that because that might be intrusive. But
mhm,
if you said, I told her about you and I shared your number with her, um, I would look out for her call. Now,
mhm.
if you said, "May I connect you?" Well, yeah, you can have her call me. Then if I had advance permission, I would do that.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think just being able to have you as a resource, to offer that, I think also says a lot, right? Like just like what we were talking about earlier, where it's not so much that you have to do anything for them, but just kind of level with them and be open to, like up until now, what I've done is just kind of like avoided or just not really touch on it. Of
Yep.
course, if somebody cries, I
Understandable.
consult them, in that
Mhm.
moment. But that's it. Like we kind of like, okay, like we're tears, moving on,
Mhm. Mhm.
so they're probably, putting on that face for me, right? Because they're like, gosh, pull yourself together, breaking down in front
Yeah.
of the filter. But then I kind of just it leaves them on their own island where I may be that one person that can make a professional recommendation of how they
Mhm.
can get support.
Exactly.
I know
And
you have a
what's really nice as a professional is if you've gone above and beyond your own role in doing your business the way you do business with a client, and you've said, "Hey, you know, I recognize that you're dealing with loss and change, and that's so hard. I know, you're connecting them to me. You've been a hero in terms of being able to connect them to the support that you're telling them that they deserve to have.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of people, anytime someone calls me and says, "Oh, well, my social worker gave me your name, or my doctor, or my friend," um, I always like to reach out and thank them, because they should know that they've been a big part of that person's um,
Journey
path to healing.
to healing. Rachel, how long would you say, and I know it's probably a hard question, but how long does it take, specifically talking about a loss of a loved one,
Uh-huh.
long does it really take for someone to, and I know everyone's different, but how long does it take them to kind of get to a place where they're not so fragile and they can kind of move forward
Hmm.
with life?
It's a great question. And I'll tell you, it depends. Um, a lot of people say time heals all wounds. That's not true. It depends on what you're doing with that time. Someone who's isolating, and someone who doesn't have appropriate support, not just my support, but literally, a supportive people around them, and supportive environment, and maybe some professional support, it's going to take a whole lot longer. So it depends. If someone is actively getting, if they're connected to others, if they are also like getting up and out of their house, typically it's incremental, right? So typically the first 2 years are the time where you see people walking through it. They're not just in place, they're actually moving through different abilities to kind of, okay, now I can get up and get out of bed. Now I can, my appetite's coming back. Now it's incremental, but those first 2 years when you've lost somebody really important to you are pretty critical.
The first
Um,
is.
I will say that it depends on a lot too. If somebody's using substances, they're numbing it, they're not really going to move much, right? They're just sort of freezing in time. If somebody is um, avoiding altogether any kind of processing of it, they're not talking about it, they're not letting anyone in, they're just going through motions, it's going to take a lot longer. But the people who do best are people who are connected to support, have their experience heard and normalized, and who've been given some practical strategies for coping. Those are the things that I do. And if they're doing it with someone else, great. It doesn't have to be me. But if they're doing those things, they will move through well, and they will get to a place. What healing looks like in grief is not like all better now. What it looks like is that they're able to think of their loved one with more love than pain. That's what healing in grief looks like.
Hmm. What's one tip? I know we should, I would love to have you back on and actually get into some of those, actually how somebody heals. Uh,
Hmm.
what do you think is the number one thing that helps somebody move forward after a loss of a loved one? Um, what do you think is the best healing tactic?
The main thing that is the most impactful is being heard and having their experience normalized. I can't tell you what um, an important aspect of healing that is, what a gift it is for somebody to be able to speak, not to a text message or a social media, sorry for your loss, but another human being who's right in front of them, who's literally inviting them to share their story through open questions, not backing away from them, and saying, yeah, that's so understandable. I get it. That's really normal. Tell me more. That.
It's like
If I
the
had just pick one thing, that is the key.
being an ear, letting them talk. It's
Absolutely.
like or you see in the movies with the counselors, and they're just like, tell me more. That's interesting.
It's not about what you say to them, it's about what you encourage them to say.
Mm, right.
That's
Um,
that's where the magic lies, really. That every wound needs a witness is my it's on my pamphlet, my brochure.
every wound needs a witness. That's
Hmm.
beautiful. My coping mechanism that I've created for my grief in my life, and we could go through daily griefs, right? Like there could
Of
be
course.
a a business deal didn't go through, or
Sure, of course. They're all
some
little
kind
micro
of
losses and
micro losses, right? The tactic that I've developed over the years is journaling. And
awesome.
so I just write it out, I'll
Yep.
just dump my heart out, on a piece of paper.
Yep. That's a form of just expressing it, getting it out. And it doesn't have to be to another human being. It's an excellent way though to get out of your body what you're trying to process. Put it out and onto paper.
Right. Do people write letters to their loved ones? Do they write
Sometimes
to them,
I have a whole bunch of different rituals, including with leaving a home, selling a home or moving out of a home. Well, sometimes I'll go in with them and, walk around it and talk about the memories that they had from that room or what energy they want to take, not to sound too airy-fairy about it, but, what do they want to take with them from this space and what do they want to leave behind?
Yeah. Well, I want to have you come on again, and I want us to talk specifically real estate, okay? And
Absolutely.
that I think would be so amazing for my customers specifically too, to really hear. Because again, I think as a professional, I think these are happening in between the lines. It's like
Absolutely.
we don't know it's there, but like we always talk in our group, everything that we all do is happening simultaneously. We're,
Exactly.
we're literally layered on top of each other. So
Exactly.
someone could be in counseling with you, they can be selling a house with me, they're doing probate with the attorney, they're working with,
Absolutely. And when they're seeing me and they're doing all those other things, I will talk with them about how to move through that process too in the best way possible. How to listen, have something with you to write down when you go through the house with a realtor. I want you to come back from that and sit down and gather your next steps and put it on your calendar. I will work through all of the stuff that otherwise might be too difficult for them.
wonderful.
And
Rachel,
if anyone wants to reach me, I'll just say that anyone listening can either just call here, I'll give you my cell phone number. Anyone listening is welcome to call it. It's 408-540-4950. If you want
amazing.
to visit my website, it's easy. It's jacksgrief.com. And if
Yeah,
you stay on there long enough, a little thing will pop up and you can put your information in. So could a client, of course. And I get that in real time and I reach out right away. Or
perfect.
of course, if they want to call it's on my website, but it rings through to my cell phone. It's 669-272-8036.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Last one is an email. If you want to email me, just info@jacksgrief.com. Easy.
Perfect. And we'll also post it when we edit the video. We will post all of your information below. So
Perfect.
they can just click right onto you, schedule a call. And like you said, every wound needs a witness. Don't do it alone. And us as professionals, learn how to integrate, these services into our daily course of action. And, I would also like, I'm going to write down, what you said as far as, just addressing it, the proper way to address it with a client in a professional way, and
Uh-huh.
say what you're going through is hard right now and you deserve somebody to be able to talk to.
Hmm.
Was that the line? What you're going
Yeah,
through
pretty
right now
much. Yeah.
is hard.
The changes and losses you're dealing with can be really difficult.
You
You
really
deserve support. I love that. You deserve
deserve
someone to talk
support.
to. And
Yeah,
then I know someone who specializes in getting through loss and change. May I connect
right.
you to
And
her?
even maybe the gesture alone, right?
Exactly.
Of offering that, it would actually make me feel better.
Yep.
Because,
Absolutely.
then it's not just like giving them the hug and then carrying on.
Exactly.
Not everyone gets to see that side of people, and
Yes.
if any of us as professionals in our group are seeing somebody experience those things or seeing the red
Yes.
flag, even the gesture of offering it, if they take it up and they give you a call, even better,
Exactly.
they
I
know that
completely agree with that.
it's
Just the gesture is lovely.
Yeah, we care. We're willing to go beyond our scope of work to provide for the needs that you have during the difficult.
Mhm.
So, woohoo, we did it.
You
All
did it.
right. Thank you, Rachel, so much for being a
Thank
guest.
you for having me. I love talking about all things related to loss and change and how to get through, and as a professional, how to confront some of that walks into your office all the time.
Exactly. Thank you a million. And we'll have you back again. And thank you for all your contribution today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.